Hi, my name is Robbie Menamin. I'm from Killadang in Westport. Born and bred, educated in the CBS in Westport, where Brother Menamin was the supervisor, the master. After that then went off to St Mary's Catering College in Galway to do a catering class to train to be a chef. Then moved on to Switzerland to finish the catering. Came back, did Dublin, and then moved off to New York and eventually came back to Westport to open up my own restaurant.
What did you do in Dublin?
I worked as a head chef in a few restaurants and then took over the lease of one of the restaurants I was working in, the restaurant Baroque in Dalkey, for 6 years, I think. And then that was the time we had our first recession in the 80s, late 80s, 90s. And I decided to move out to New York. And New York was an interesting place. I think it's one of the best cities I've ever been in. Work hard, play hard, but you do believe you have to work very hard to get on there.
And did you work in many places in New York?
I used to do a lot of relief work, which is a very good way of seeing the city and finding out about the kitchens. You would work on days off for head chefs and second chefs, and for friends who would want to take a week off, you would cover for them. I probably worked in maybe 5 or 6 places overall, but I spent most of my time working in a private club down on Wall Street.
In Wall Street. What was it like there?
It was interesting. I used to have my breakfast some mornings on the Twin Towers, so when it came down there was a bit of emotion there, obviously, and a lot of the businesses around that I knew, especially the Irish pubs. I don't know if any of them come back. I think maybe 1 or 2 have come back, but some of them were quite new, doing very well. And one couple in particular who just got married and moved out and opened a bar, and they came to work to see it covered in asbestos, so they were gone.
Right.
Unfortunate, but there was a possibility if I was in New York I could have been up there.
Could have been up there, yeah. What time did you go for your breakfast at?
About 20 to 9 o'clock.
Right.
I used to get the express from downtown, or from uptown.
And how far up the building would you go? Was it on the ground floor?
Up to the observation.
Sure, you'd be in trouble if you had been there, would you?
Well, I probably wouldn't have been, because I probably wouldn't have felt anything.
So, Robbie, you came back to Westport. What year did you come back?
I think it was 96, 97. My father unfortunately passed away, and at that stage I wanted to change in New York. So when I came home I saw an opportunity in Westport. There wasn't that many restaurants around in the town itself, so I decided, let's give it a crack. It was a fairly impulse move, and I timed it. I think I got the timing quite good, because at that particular time in Westport there was a lot of construction. There was, the leisure park was being built, the hotels were being built and expanded, the major waterworks was being done. And I remember one morning sitting at the Mall, and I think we calculated there was something like £60 million being invested in Westport. So I thought, well, why not? There's worse places, and as you can see, it's turned out quite well.
So what did you do then?
I contacted this business, and to cut a long story short, it was for lease, it was for rent. So initially I ended up leasing it, and it was a restaurant previous, so it saved a lot of hassle. It had the licenses and it had the actual planning permission. When we set up the premises, initially I'd thought about starting up a coffee shop come Delhi, but as the facility, there was no restaurant in Westport, and the few restaurants at the quay were changing, and I just sat around and discovered that maybe we're ready for this. So I introduced a fairly radical change into the food, and it went down very well. As a matter of fact, it was quite obvious there was a major opening for it.
What did you call it?
My main regret was I wasn't bigger, because I was a quite small operator. It would have been better if I was bigger.
What did you call it?
We had the restaurant set up, we had everything in motion, we had the menu written out, and we had no name. And it was a very interesting one. I rang up chef friends of mine, and the restaurants I worked in Dalkey was the Baroque. Again, you wouldn't associate it with a restaurant. The Sign of the Dove, Parisi, so they were all names as opposed to the restaurant, whatever. So I said, I want a name, but I don't want the name restaurant in it. So I said something like Aubergine, but there was an Aubergine in Dublin and in London. Zest was one of them. There was a lot of places, Eden, which was already taken in the Temple Bar. And I said something like the lemon tree, but there is a lemon tree, there's quite a few lemon trees. And then we just turned around and said the lemon peel. And the minute I said the lemon peel, everybody looked at me. And this was all done, and I mean literally in minutes. So we said the lemon peel, we wrote it down and we said it. And I phoned around 20 people and 19 people said yes and one person said no. So that's how it happened to be the lemon peel.
That's democracy.
Quite unusual, but I was very lucky because it was a good name.
That's democracy.
That's democracy, yes.
What was different, Robbie, about your one than from the usual run-of-the-mill in Westport?
Probably because I didn't have a big menu and I didn't do regular restaurant stuff. I had a lot of experience from being travelling around, and I used an awful lot of fresh herbs. And while we were brought up, when I was brought up cooking, fresh herbs were just something you saw in an encyclopedia. So there was a lot of packaged stuff, but being travelling a fair bit, I just decided to keep it very simple. It's a motto a lot of places use. It's called the KISS syndrome, K-I-S-S, keep it simple, stupid. And I went strictly by that motto, so I had 5 or 6 appetizers, 5 or 6 main courses, and decided to do them good and clean, not too fussy. And it was amazing, the customers actually took to it. I didn't do a lot of heavy sauces like the old-fashioned scallops on a shell, where they're just basically killed 3 or 4 times with cream and cheese and mashed potato. I just took them out of the shell and cooked them medium and served them with the light sauce. And people thought they were amazing, but they weren't, because that's the way scallops should taste. A lot of food was, keep it simple, you what's the word? When you buy food, it's already dead, so you don't have to kill it a second time. I ran it for approximately 10-12 years, and it was pretty intense work. It was the best way to describe it was a roller coaster ride I wouldn't like to have missed. But I did the obvious thing, which everybody does after they retire. I worked too hard and too long. And looking back at it now, it was a bit silly, but we all do it. Put a lot of effort, business was very good. There's never a lot of money in restaurants, contrary to what people think, because there's a lot of overheads. And Westport isn't the cheapest town to do business in. It's quite expensive, as a lot of towns, but people forget that when they sit down at a meal and look at the menu. Unfortunately, due to health issues, a couple of years ago, I was advised to do the honourable thing and get out while I was ahead. So unfortunately, due to that reason, I've retired now.